Well, welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. So for today's video, I wanted to recommend some CGC 9.8 comic books that I think have the most long-term potential. And, because if you're like me, I really think about holding on to these comic books for like 15 or 20 years and just getting great pride of ownership during that time. But it'd be nice to know as well, like if your books during that time have some potential to go up in like popularity and in price as well, for sure. So that's kind of what this video is all about, just what I think are some really high potential CGC 9.8 comic books. And doing the research for the video, I kind of noticed like almost all the books on this list are really iconic brands and iconic superheroes and iconic superhero teams. Because, these are the books that are going to be around in like 50 years because the brands are just so ingrained in our culture. And I think that's important. You want to stick to that theme when you're thinking about like high potential investment grade CGC 9.8 comic books. And also another thing too I noticed is mostly superheroes rather than supervillains. And I think just in general, kind of heroes have more potential than villains maybe. And, obviously Incredible Hulk 181 and Amazing Spider-Man 129, first appearance of Wolverine and first appearance of Punisher have done so well in value. But then, first Thanos kind of goes against the rule, so maybe not an ironclad rule, but most of these comic books involve superheroes, and superheroes do have a lot of potential, I think. So before we get into the whole list here, I want to talk about really quick, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 51. This is the first appearance of Jennika, who eventually goes on to become the first female Ninja Turtle. And I've mentioned this book quite often lately on the channel about, just a book that has a lot of potential for a modern first appearance. I think the first female Ninja Turtle is kind of a cool first appearance, certainly a special one. And then given like how good female first appearances I've done, like NYX number 3, the Edge of Spider-Verse number 2, first Spider-Gwen. So I just think there's a lot of potential with this book, and you can still, I think a good price for this book is like 150-ish in the CGC 9.8. So still some potential, I think, for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 51. Wanted to mention it really quick, but not really a part of the list, I guess. So first book on the list. Such an iconic book, kind of an obvious pick, but a New Mutants 98, yeah. You really want to have the first appearance of Deadpool on a sort of a high potential list. It's sort of one of the only big superheroes sort of from the 90s, I would say. Certainly there's others, but one of the main ones that really sticks out. Looking on the census, there's 3,140 CGC 9.8s in the blue label for New Mutants 98, and CGC 9.8 ratio is 20%. So of all graded copies, 20% of them are CGC 9.8s. And that's not too bad for an early 90s book. Yeah, you know what? Deadpool's so popular, so that 3,140 number, there's so many of them because he's so popular, and this is a well-printed early 90s book. So that might be a slight negative against it, but I think an iconic first appearance such as Deadpool, who's a superhero that still has a lot of potential, I think, is one you want to have. So price-wise, for the direct edition, you can tell that it's got the Captain America thing. The newsstand edition has the UPC barcode. But for the direct edition, in the CGC 9.8, I think about $650 to $700 is fair. And then the newsstand edition, sort of right around $700. I see like a good deal on the newsstand edition in the CGC 9.8 white pages is about $750. So, newsstand being a little bit more rare. Early 90s books are kind of cool to get in the newsstand, so you may want to consider that. But this is a book I think now is the kind of time to buy. This price has been pulling back for maybe 3 to 5 years now. Ever since those first Deadpool movies hit, the book kind of blew up to about $1,000 US. And obviously now going for like $650 to $700. I think is one. It's kind of, good time to buy right now before some of these MCU movies start coming out. And this book will undoubtedly kind of heat up again. So, next book on the list, kind of one out there a bit for the list, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures number 1. So this is the first appearance of Krang, Bebop, and Rocksteady. So these are all like classic Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles villains that I really know and love. And even me, like I pretty much think of Ninja Turtles, and I think a lot of people do think of Ninja Turtles as the 4-colored Ninja Turtles with like Bebop, Rocksteady, and Krang being the villains. And obviously Shredder, but not the first appearance of Shredder in this one. But this is the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic, Adventures comic, that came out. This is the 1988 one I'm talking about here, the number one. There's 120 CGC 9.8s in the blue label of this book. 46.5% of them are CGC 9.8, so not particularly rare in the CGC 9.8, but there's just not a lot of them out there. Obviously only 120 CGC 9.8s. Price-wise for this book, yeah, just so underfollowed as far as the first appearances of all those iconic villains. And correct me if I'm wrong, like, I'm almost positive this could be the first appearance of, like, the 4-color Ninja Turtles. Because originally, in sort of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic, they didn't have the colors. So that could be a bit of a wild card with this book, kind of an undervalued thing about this book. But getting into price, so I was looking on some completed listings and saw 2 of them go for $125 in the last 2 months, I would say, which I think is a really good price, sort of near the bottom of the fair market value range. And then I saw some completed listings for about $175 in this book too, in the blue label. Yeah, I think this book, with those first appearances and sort of that early colored Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with their 4 colors appearance, that could be a bit underappreciated, I think. So yeah, this book I think fits on a high potential list. Okay, so the next one here is Guardians of the Galaxy number 1. Talked about this one periodically lately too. This one is Guardians of the Galaxy number 1 from 2008, and it's the first full appearance of new Team Guardians of the Galaxy. And you also get the origin in there too. It says that in my Overstreet price guide. That's the origin of the new Team Guardians of the Galaxy. So, you know, you get a first appearance of like an underfollowed team. But what I really like about this book is the census info. So 162 CGC 9.8. Not too bad, a 1 of 162 collector item. But 9.8 ratio is 23%. So of all graded copies, 23% of them are CGC 9.8s. And that's really nice and low and rare for a modern book. Yeah, this book coming out in 2008. A lot of books after the year 2000, they're not anywhere near this rare or this hard to find in the CGC 9.8 with that CGC 9.8 ratio. Yeah, anywhere near 20s, getting lower into the low 20s for a modern book is you don't really see that very often. So you get a good combo in this book of a rare 9.8 with an underfollowed, underappreciated first appearance of a new team, kind of Guardians of the Galaxy. I think, you know, I love the MCU movies. I think a lot of people do. So when you think long term, like some of these kids growing up that saw these MCU movies growing up, I think, you know, this book's got a lot of potential to increase in value, and given it's so rare on the census too. So price-wise, about $175, I'm going to say, is about the fair market value for this book. I got 2 of them. I paid $190 for one, and $160, I think it was, for the other one. So yeah, about $175 I think is a fair value, and with it being pretty rare in the CGC 9.8 is one I would recommend, yeah. And new Team Guardians of the Galaxy, yeah, I still feel like that's underappreciated. So next one, a bit of an obvious one too, I think. Ultimate Fallout number 4, first appearance of Miles Morales. This is the first print too. Yeah, the second prints are really like heating up. The second print that looks similar to this one, but you see his face, that one's getting really hot too. So maybe those, you can consider those maybe. But there's 1,590 of these in the CGC 9.8 for a really popular first appearance. 31.9% is the CGC 9.8 ratio. So not quite as low as Guardians of the Galaxies, but still pretty low for a modern book, Ultimate Fallout 4. Yeah, this is more rare in the CGC 9.8 than like Edge of Spider-Verse number 2 and NYX number 3, which are 2 books that are usually more expensive than this book. So yeah, I've recommended this book quite often. We were doing a lot of videos kind of 6 months-ish ago, you know, buy this book around $350. But now the price has kind of picked up. Yeah, I think $450 to $500 in the CGC 9.8 is more realistic for this one now. It wasn't $350 for very long, to be honest. Yeah, so I think look to get it closer to $450, maybe even closer to $400 if you're lucky. In the first print, I think you want to have an iconic first appearance of the new Spider-Man, who's been so accepted in pop culture, too, in the comic book community, I think. Like, Miles Morales, new Spider-Man, really is, like, very accepted now and well-known, and definitely a first appearance I think you want to have. And there's so much potential for more movies and with Miles Morales, so one you want to have it on a most high potential list. A bit of an outlier on the list. Next one here. Silver Surfer 44, first appearance of the Infinity Gauntlet. And yeah, we'll look on the census quick here. It's there's 250 CGC 9.8s in the blue label, and 23.5% is the CGC 9.8 ratio. That's pretty low as well for an early 90s book. Sort of this book and New Mutants 98, you know, pretty decently rare for early 90s books, actually. A lot of times you just see those 9.8 ratios like 30, 40, 50% for early 90s books. So not too bad looking on the census. A 1 of 250 collector item. And this is a book that's really sort of cooled off in price, and I think now is a really decent time to buy this one. Certainly if you have a really long-term time horizon too. Because it's cooled off after all the, you know, MCU movies with the Infinity Gauntlet in them, obviously. So it's cooled off since then. I purchased one of mine during Avengers Endgame for $230, because I have two of these. And then I purchased the other one like 6 months after Avengers Endgame, and it was like $155. And I think that's about a really good price to get right now. About $160, $150, $170 even. For, yeah, Silver Surfer 44, first appearance of the Infinity Gauntlet. So, yeah, this is obviously kind of a villain, because I mentioned, like, most of them are superheroes, but this is a villain. And I think, you know, it's the only first appearance really noted of a weapon, like, ever. So it's, like, the biggest weapon ever in comic books, is, like, how I kind of think of it. So I just think right now it's a really underfollowed, like, not really too many people are thinking of it, but when all these kids grow up, that saw all these MCU movies with the Infinity Gauntlet, I just think the first appearance of the Infinity Gauntlet for, like, $160 in the CGC 9.8 white pages is a really good buy right now with a lot of long-term potential given that these movies were so popular. So next book, Star Wars #1, and yeah, just thinking of iconic brands, if you ever want an iconic brand, you know, just buy Star Wars #1, because yeah, Star Wars is such an iconic brand, and I think now too it's sort of my style to buy when maybe the brand's not as super popular, and certainly there's, you know, some negative Star Wars press, I guess, and opinions out there. But always a chance with Disney and their huge budget and billions of dollars to kind of come back and do a lot of awesome Star Wars movies in the next 20 years kind of thing. So, yeah, I think Star Wars #1 is still one you kind of want to have, and it's a bit of an unsexy pick, I would say, out of this list. But such an iconic brand. And yeah, we'll look on the census. It looks good. On the CGC census, there's 615 CGC 9.8s out there. It's kind of a 1 of 615 collector item. And 7.4% CGC 9.8 ratio. Lowest on the list here. So of all graded copies, only 7.4% of them are CGC 9.8s. But this is a 1977 book, so you got to consider that. But still, even considering it's a 1977 book, that's still pretty low. Only 7.4% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8. So it looks good on the census. Iconic, you know, first appearance of a lot of people and, you know, the Star Wars brand in comic books. So CGC 9.8 price for this one. I think in a new case, like a really good looking one, it's about $900. You know, maybe if you get lucky, closer to $800. You tend to see some of these maybe not looking so centered, like they just don't have that eye appeal, even though they're 9.8s. So you might get one of those, maybe even get lucky, maybe even under $800. But most of these really good looking ones with nice scans on eBay go for around $900. So, you know, one that's pretty expensive still, but it's an older book and such an iconic brand. And I know I really wanted to pick one up, being, you know, a pretty serious CGC 9.8 investment collector. And yeah, speaking of serious CGC 9.8 comic books here. Got the Amazing Spider-Man 300 as the last book on the list here in the CGC 9.8. So this is the first full appearance of Venom. Origin and first full appearance of Venom. The thing about Venom here is, you know, you think, you know, is he a superhero or is he a villain? He's almost like the first anti-hero ever. And I think that's going to become more appreciated over time. Because obviously when he first came out, he's a villain. Like, as I grew up, I thought he was a villain kind of thing, but obviously some of the story arcs, he's like the anti-hero now, and I think that's becoming more and more of a thing. So that's a bit underappreciated, I think, about this book. Obviously you get the classic Todd McFarlane cover. Amazing Spider-Man books are so popular. This one is such a classic. Look on the census. 1006 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. And CGC 9.8 ratio, 5.8%. So of all graded copies, only 5.8% of them are CGC 9.8s. And that's why this book's really expensive. It's, you know, for a late 80s book, like it has a lower CGC 9.8 ratio than Star Wars #1. Yet it's 11 years, you know, came out 11 years after Star Wars #1. So gives you the idea of just, it's, you know, for a late 80s book, it's so rare in the CGC 9.8. Yeah, with that 5.8% CGC 9.8 ratio. So two things that make it special, that rarity in the 9.8, and then this is, yeah, the first anti-hero pretty much ever. And obviously Venom has such a big cult following of fans. But price-wise for Amazing Spider-Man 300 in the CGC 9.8, anywhere from like 1,750 to like 2,000 and over. Because if you notice with this one, it's got a really nice deep red background. This is a really nice one that I was able to grab. Sometimes you see them with the orangey type background. That's going to be closer to 1,750 with the nice colors and the deep red background closer to 2,000. And I've seen some really good looking ones with nice scans go for over 2,000. But just a book that, because it's so rare in the CGC 9.8, and, you know, it's so special because of that first anti-hero appearance. And, I mean, not to mention Todd McFarlane art, he's got his cult of following. This circle cover is so, like, homaged a million times. So, a lot of reasons why this one is so expensive now. But I think, you know, with potential, you're like, oh, at $2,000, like, is there more potential? Like, I think this is always going to be the benchmark sort of highest, most attainable book. That's it's always going to be the benchmark highest in price because of the rarity in the 9.8, and because that, yeah, this I think is the first ever anti-hero basically in comic books, is the way I've kind of thought about it. So, all right, yeah, good list to get through, I think, and obviously, you know, focusing more on like the classics here with, you know, high potential. I think not really sort of an underfollowed kind of list, but. You know, just concluding up here, I think with some top picks, I think it's a great time to buy New Mutants 98. Yeah, I think New Mutants 98 right now, after those Deadpool movies came out all those years ago, blew up in price. Like, right now is one of the better times to buy it in the last three to 5 years. Yeah, hopefully you can get it around $650 to $750, I would say. Yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures. I think it's so under the radar, this book, and you know, it's not super rare in the CGC 9.8 or anything, but I just think on popularity alone in those first appearances that I think a lot of people really remember Bebop, Rocksteady, and Krang, certainly, and that early appearance of the 4-color Ninja Turtles is a reason to, yeah, include it on a list of high potential books for sure. Ultimate Follow 4 and Star Wars #1, like, just so iconic, the brands, like, you know, SpiderMan, Star Wars. So I think, you know, you just don't want to forget about those. I think some people tend to forget about them as well, I think, for sure. So, but just two iconic brands that have a lot of potential for sure. And then Guardians of the Galaxy's #1. Still, I think the new team Guardians of the Galaxy first appearance is not one that I see often, you know, within the comic book community, like people showing off their books and stuff like that. Doesn't seem to be that, you know, one that a lot of people have. So I just think that's under the radar and overlooked and has that potential. And then because it's really rare in the CGC 9.8 for a modern book with that 23% CGC 9.8 ratio, yeah, that's definitely should be one of my top picks, I think. So, alright, I think that'll be it for the video here. If you haven't already, I'd invite you to join the team and subscribe to Team CGC 9.8 and hit the bell to get all the latest notifications. Add me on Instagram and Twitter too. Yeah, I'll have all the links in the description below for all that. But thanks so much for watching today. Yeah, I think focusing on some, you know, iconic books here that do have a lot of potential, and I think, you know, when you're thinking, if maybe you're just starting out, this is a really good list to kind of look at to start out, to make sure you got some of the bigger keys out there, I think, that are really iconic and that do have a lot of potential to increase in value over time. So, alright, that'll be it for the video today, but yeah, really appreciate all the support, and thanks to everyone, and yeah, appreciate all the messages and people messaging me on Instagram, having some great conversations on Instagram as well. But yeah, thanks so much for watching today. Thanks again for all the support, and I'll see you on the next one.